Hello, Pastor Ben Miller here from Buntville Bible Church with you this morning. One thing I want to take note before we get into today's lesson is that this is actually not the lesson I'm going to be preaching this Sunday at church. What I'm going to do is actually film the message at church and post the message that I do that week the following week. And since we're just starting this, that means I have a dead week here to fill, so I want to do something a little different, something I don't normally do, address issues that I don't necessarily always talk about, just to challenge us to think, especially on everything going on from Corona and different things, and the fact that we're in an election year. What I really want to do is just challenge you to think, and to think biblically, and just try to work with you in taking biblical principles out of the Bible and then applying them to daily life. Especially even as you make decisions, not just in daily life, but even decisions of national importance, like even voting. Now, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or anything like that. I don't endorse candidates. I think for religious leaders to endorse a political candidate is just kind of silly. Not that I really believe it's illegal, but I just believe it's silly. So I'm not going to talk about parties here. I'm not going to talk about, we're not even going to mention particular politicians today. I just want to, again, challenge you to think. I'm going to ask this question to you. How can you be a good steward of your vote? And I want to apply this thought in two areas. One is in the church. Because you know, hopefully most of you know, that most churches have membership and those members vote. And so we as believers need to be a good steward with our voting and our decision making in the church government. And then secondly, believers are allowed to vote in presidential campaigns and in the general election. And so we need to be wise in how we use the vote, and we need to be wise as a nation about voting. And so how can we take some biblical principles and apply that to our thought? What we're going to look at today is Matthew 25. And we're going to look at what is called the parable of the talents. And so we're going to go to Matthew 25, and I'm going to start with verse 14. All right, and this is Jesus speaking. He says, this is Jesus, "For it will be like a man," speaking of the kingdom of heaven, "going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted them with his property." So we have a rich man, large landowner, has lots of property, has lots of money, and so he's going on a long journey, so he needs somebody to watch his estate while he's gone. So verse 15, "To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away." All right, so he entrusts each one with a different sum of money to take care of, to watch over until he comes again, until he comes back. To continue, "He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more." So the guy who was given the most, the 5 talents, he goes out and he trades. He does business. He invests in the stock market. He buys cattle and then he sells them at a higher price. He buys land, right? Does some improvements to the land, and then he resells the land. Okay? He buys low, sells high. So that's what the first guy does. The second guy, "So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more." So the second guy does the same thing. Now to the third person, "But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money." So he does nothing with it. He just sits on it. He doesn't invest in it. He doesn't even put it in the bank. He just buries it in the ground and just lets it waste. It'd be like someone who has a house and doesn't do anything to the house. They never repair it when it gets broken down. It's not that they don't remodel it or do an add-on to it, or put a 2-car garage onto the house and improve the house, or do some real nice landscaping to bring the value of the house up. No, they just let it go. Nobody lives in it. Nobody takes care of it. Nobody fixes the roof when it leaks, and so it just begins to decay. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with him. So the master, he's gone after a long time. Now he comes back to talk with him, or to see what they had done with his property. "And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, 'Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. here I have made 5 talents more. So the first guy says, hey, I went, I invested it, I was wise with it, this is what I have. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And so the master says, listen, I gave you this much. You were faithful and used it wisely and took care of it. Therefore, I will give you more to take care of. I will give you greater responsibility because you proved to me that you were trustworthy. The next verse. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I made 2 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And so we have the second servant, the same thing. He is wise. He is good with what he was given. And so now he gets entrusted with more. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you do not sow and gathering where you scatter no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he who will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast a worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so the servant who does nothing, who just lets the property go, is cast out. And what little bit he had, what little bit of responsibility he had, is taken from him. Now you ask, how, Pastor Ben, how are we applying this to voting in stewardship? Well, before we get to that, we just want to make 4 observations of a good steward. 4 characteristics of a good steward, and then we will apply those 4 principles, 4 characteristics to this idea of being a good steward with the vote. First is courage, right? If we look at courage, because the poor steward, the bad steward, right? He even said, I was afraid. I was afraid to take the chance on buying a property. What if the market crashed? What if, and I ended up losing the money that I was given? What if I buy the cow to resell it and it dies? What if I buy the cow so it has a calf, and then I have that calf to be able to sell, and then sell the milk and then make more money? Well, what if something bad happens? Fear. Now, it doesn't mean, I do think, and that really goes into our second point, diligent worker, that doesn't mean that these other 2 took crazy, stupid risks, all right? They didn't go out and play the lottery with what they'd been entrusted. They didn't go bet on sports games or go to Vegas or to a casino and gamble the money. No. They did research. They didn't just trust somebody else. They didn't make foolish investment decisions or get part of pyramid schemes. Notice diligence. They traded. They worked hard. They thought through, okay, this is what's going on. This is what I need to do. All right, this is what the market is doing. This is what the market tends to do. When they go to pick, let's say they were to go and put the money into a 401k and they had to pick a mutual fund. They don't pick the mutual fund, and there's several mutual funds they're given to choose from, and they can see which ones do good over a 10 or 20-year period, and they see which ones are losing money over a 10 to 20-year period. They don't pick the one that's losing money. They do their research and say, oh, it makes sense to go this way. It makes sense to buy this cow. It makes sense to buy this house in this area. They think, they're diligent, they work hard. They do their research. That's part of being a good steward with what we've been given. I also see they walk, I believe, really in integrity. Notice the one servant, he had to bury it and hide it. These men, they're open with their master. Hey, this is what I did. I traded this way. They traded with integrity. They didn't cheat people. They didn't slide underneath the surface. They weren't dishonest. They walked with integrity. They weren't afraid. They didn't have to worry about the master when he got back looking through the books and seeing if they had cheated him out of his money. And then finally we see that what? Good stewards are entrusted with more. Right? The two servants who did these things were entrusted by their master with more. They were given more responsibility. They were given more things. So how then does this apply to what we just mentioned? Well, first in the church. Right? There are many today who are afraid to become church members and to be part of church meetings, business meetings, and to vote. And some of it's because, just like all these other things, you have to know what you're voting on. You have to understand the situation when the church votes to maybe put, to increase the building size, or to get new hymnals, or even on, okay, who's going to be our new pastor, and who's going to be a deacon. You kind of have to know and understand some people are afraid, or quite frankly, they're just lazy and don't want to think that hard. And they don't take their responsibility seriously. And that's not always the case. Some people feel that they just aren't qualified for it. And that's another discussion, and we ought not to be as harsh on those, because if they truly believe they're not ready, now that says something for the church, because they should be working towards getting ready, and the church should be helping them get there. But if they don't feel that they are capable of making good decisions, and so they are wise, therefore not putting themselves where they have to make decisions that will be bad, I don't know as if we should look down upon them. And that certainly holds true as far as taking part in national elections as opposed to just church business. But it's a very important thing. It's the same, we talk about this being diligent and not being afraid, even at this time, right? With churches having to find alternate ways to reach our people. You know, we could be too afraid of the internet. Well, if we go and put stuff on the internet, what's going to happen? What will happen? Could we get in trouble? Will somebody comment on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, that won't be very nice or makes us look bad? I mean, are we going to be afraid, or are we going to push forward? So even there as a church, we have to be good steward with the time we're given. We can't just, at this time when we can't meet because of the sickness or other things, or we choose not to meet, we can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend the world is not moving anymore. We still have to be out and engaging, and we have to be wise in how we go about that. And be wise to know when it is time to open again. Because in most places we do have exceptions, and we ought to praise God for that. So to be a good steward means to be a good steward in the church where God has placed us, and to take it seriously, and to take church membership seriously. Because why not just let anybody vote in a church meeting? I mean, it's the church, so believers are part of the church, so why do we have to have certain criteria to be a church member? Why do you have to live your life a certain way? Why do you have to get baptized and profess faith in Jesus? Because that's all part of the stewardship thing. Because the church is believers. And if you're not willing to profess that you believe in Jesus and to follow what Scripture says about baptism and how one should live your life, then you shouldn't be entrusted with the direction of an entire church. And I challenge us as we think of these upcoming elections and the things going on. Some of those same principles hold true. You know, a lot is made of voter turnout. And you know, a lot of times we're told that you need to go out and vote. You need to exercise that right. Whether or not you know anything or not, you should just show up and vote. And I tell people, look, if you're not willing to take the time and research the candidates and understand the issues, do everybody a favor and don't vote. You know, we want to make it super easy to vote. And I think it should be easy to vote. Don't misunderstand understand me. It shouldn't be that hard to register to vote. But you don't have to register to vote every year. And I don't think it's really that demanding to ask people to go to the polls and vote. I really don't. I'm not saying we can't do mail-in ballots, but I don't think they should be open to everybody. It should be only those who truly have handicaps, or military who are away and can't physically vote, and college students who are away and can't physically come home and vote. There's really no reason the rest of us can't go down and vote. People say, well, with the coronavirus, I mean, there might be a little bit of a point to that, but all the men and women who have died over the years to bring us the right to vote. Are we taking any more chance than they are to ensure that the vote is a vote of integrity? Because that was one of the principles we talked about, right? Men with integrity, men with industrious, that was good stewardship. See, you run into some of those problems when you have mail-in votes, because you have to check to make sure the signature matches where where someone does it in person. That's why I do believe that we should have voter ID. You should have to prove who you are. And so a lot of times mail-in, especially if you do it like some states where anybody could pick up your ballot and take it instead of actually put it in the mail and giving it to the mailman. How do you know if those ballots are real? Or not faked or forged or tampered with? See, a good steward takes their time and can be entrusted with the vote. Those are things we really need to I think as a nation we don't think about. That if someone is unable or unwilling to take the time to register, to get a photo ID, should we then entrust them with the fate of an entire nation? Food for thought. Food for thought. That we need to take what God has given us and use it for His blessing. I have to ask your pardon because the phone has been ringing and now you get to hear our wonderful voice message. Alright, sorry about that phone interruption. So, to think about it, this is a good way. I know a lot of people don't like to hear what I just said, but I want us to think. Remember, look at the principle that we saw in our text today. He who is faithful with a little will be entrusted with more. He who proves not faithful with a little, he shouldn't be entrusted with more. Which is why I think it's a good idea that you have to register to vote. And it's really not that hard, and that you should get voter ID. And again, neither one of those things I think are too strenuous. But it shows, even in a little aspect, this idea of being faithful with a little that we've been entrusted with. Because we have people going to the polls determining the fate and direction of an entire nation. And that's a very heavy thing. And it is also a wonderful blessing that God in our country has allowed us, each individual, the opportunity to vote. And it's something we ought to take seriously, and in the coming days and weeks we need to really think through the issues and think through the candidates and really pray through the issues and pray through the candidates and study our Bibles, that we would make decisions both in church and at the polls for our country that are honoring and pleasing to God, that we would be a good steward with the opportunity to vote that God has granted both myself and you. Now next week we'll actually see a take of us at church, the actual service, the actual message Sunday. And so we'll play that for you, and we'll be back to, I suppose, a more, you might say, a more regular approach. And I'll be preaching from Romans chapter 4. We'll be starting back into our series in Romans, so I am really excited to do that. So until then, this is Pastor Ben. Live long and prosper.